Hello, and welcome to the Those Dweebs podcast, where we have a little bit of everything for everyone. Let's roll the d20 of fate and see what we are talking about today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first officially recorded podcast in 2025. And it is our 20th episode. I was not expecting it to line up so perfectly like that. But I am excited to get back into this and see where this year takes us. I'm even going to do some stuff outside of my normal comfort zone, and today's episode is going to be a true crime podcast, and I have been avoiding it, but I've actually I think I have the courage to do it today. So don't worry, I will put a trigger warning to what these involve, and you can go from there if you want to continue this episode or move on to one of our other mini episodes. Alright guys, let's get into it. So today we are going to be talking about the Cropsey legend. And the following trigger warnings are child abduction, murder, mental illness, psychological horror, true crime elements, and abuse and neglect. So if any of those are not something you're a big fan of, like I said before, I would say maybe skip this one and move on to one of our others. But I digress. Let's get into this. I've stalled enough. The Cropsey legend is one of the most disturbing urban myths to emerge from the depths of Staten Island, New York, and it blends the lines between fiction and reality. What started as a spooky story to keep children in line evolved into a terrifying real-world tragedy, entwining folklore with the grim truth of an actual criminal case. Over the years, Cropsey became more than just a ghost story. It became a cautionary tale with horrifying real-life implications, sparking debates about the nature of urban legends and the lingering psychological effects they leave on a community. The Cropsey legend, like many urban myths, centers on an entity designed to terrify children into obedience. Descriptions of Cropsey vary slightly from person to person, but the core details remain the same. He is a man, often described as deformed or disfigured, who preys on children who wander too far from home. Cropsey is typically said to lurk in the woods or abandoned buildings, waiting for the perfect opportunity to snatch a child away. In some versions of the myth, Cropsey is depicted as a gruesome figure, sometimes with a hook or a knife for a hand, reminiscent of other well-known urban legends like the hook-handed man. In others, he is a more elusive, shadowy figure who simply watches from the distance, silently waiting to abduct children. The stories told by parents often emphasize the danger of disobedience, warning children to stay close, or else they risk becoming Cropsey's next victim. One of the most enduring elements of the Cropsey myth is the connection to Willowbrook State School, an abandoned institution for children with disabilities, which plays a central role in the way the legend has evolved over time. As the tale became more deeply entwined with the real history of Staten Island, Cropsey morphed from a generic figure into a specific menacing entity tied to local landmarks. It was no longer just a vague boogeyman, but something that felt very real, a fear-driven reflection of society's anxieties about mental illness, abandonment, and the safety of vulnerable populations. While Cropsey is closely tied to Staten Island, its origins reflect broader cultural fears that permeate folklore. The figure of Cropsey shares many traits with other well-known urban legends across the United States, from the hook-handed man to the tale of the babysitter and the man upstairs. All these stories share a common theme: the fear of an outside threat, often in a form of an unknown figure preying on innocent children. The hook-handed man. One of the key elements of Cropsey's mythology is its resemblance to the hook-handed man urban legend, a chilling tale in which a couple in a car is terrorized by a disfigured man who attacks them with a hook. The hook represents not only the grotesque and frightening appearance of the assailant, but also the danger lurking just beyond what we can see or understand. In Cropsey's case, the fear lies in the unknown. Who is this man? Where does he live? And what will he do to those who stray too far? The inclusion of such details amplifies the terror, making Cropsey not just a mythical figure, but an ever-present lurking danger. Fear of mental illness and institutions. Another factor in the evolution of the Cropsey legend is the growing societal fear of mental illness in the institution where people with mental disabilities were often confined. At the time the Cropsey legend took root, institutions like Willowbrook were seen as horrific, overcrowded places where patients lived in squalor and neglect. These institutions were also often misunderstood, fueling anxiety and suspicion. It was easy to imagine that a mentally ill figure neglected by society might escape from such a place and roam the woods looking for children to abduct or harm. Speaking as someone who does a lot of research into the paranormal and a lot of watch so many investigators go to different asylums or mental institutions that are often very haunted, the going into the history behind them is heartbreaking. It was either just full of neglect or just not well maintained whatsoever. So unfortunately, places like Willowbrook, it's sad, but also unsurprising, especially for the times that it took place. The real-life connection. Andre Rand and the Tragedy of Staten Island. While the legend of Cropsey is undeniably unsettling, its horror intensified in the 1970s and 1980s, where it was revealed that a real man, Andre Rand, was tied to the disappearances of several children from Staten Island. Rand's life story adds a dark and tragic layer to the folklore, making the line between myth and reality even blurrier. Andre Rand's background. Andre Rand was a man with a history of mental illness and was known to have worked at Willowbrook State School, a fact that would later become crucial in connecting him to the disappearances. Rand's behavior, combined with his connection to the infamous institution, contributed to the public's perception of him as a dangerous figure, one who could be the very embodiment of the Cropsey legend. He was often seen as a strange loner figure who wandered Staten Island's forests and abandoned properties, further feeding into the image of the wild man from local folklore. The disappearance. The first notable case that linked Rand to the Cropsey myth was the 1981 disappearance of 12-year-old Holly Ann Hughes, a girl who went missing near the Willowbrook property. Holly's disappearance sparked widespread panic, but her case remained unsolved for several years. Then in 1987, another girl named Jennifer Schweger disappeared. Jennifer, who had Down syndrome, was last seen near the same area where Holly had vanished. A search for her eventually led to the discovery of her body in a shallow grave in the woods. The chilling link between Jennifer's murder and the Legend of Cropsy began to emerge as investigators connected Rand to the crimes. The crime and conviction. In 2004, Andre Rand was convicted of the murder and kidnapping of Jennifer Schweger, though he was also a suspect in multiple other child disappearances. Jennifer's case was the only one in which he was formally convicted. Despite the lack of concrete evidence to the other disappearances, Rand's criminal history, his disturbing ties to Willowbrook, and his erratic behavior led many to believe that he was behind the vanishing of the other children, including Holly Ann Hughes and several others. The horror of these crimes cast a long shadow over Staten Island, and suddenly the Cropsey legend felt far too real. The psychological impact. The fact that these events were happening so close to the area where the Cropsey myth had taken root made the legend resonate even more deeply with the local residents. Children who had been once terrified by the myth now had an unsettling reality to point to. Cropsey was not just a story, but potentially a reflection of their own darkest fears. The real-life story of Andre Rand turned the myth into something more deeply personal for the community. The documentary Cropsey from 2009. And I will say that I had a patron actually get this documentary, and it kind of sparked this whole want to talk about this, because I feel like I have heard of Cropsey before that, but then I was reading the back of the DVD for the documentary, and I was like, okay, this is definitely unsettling, but also I'm interested to learn more. I still need to rent it myself and actually check it out, but I definitely was drawn to this for some reason. Don't know why. In 2009, filmmakers Joshua Zeman and Barbara Bronciso? I am so sorry. produced a documentary titled Cropsey, which explored the connection between the urban legend and the real-life crimes committed by Andre Rand. Through interviews with local residents, law enforcement, and the families of the victims, the film chronicles how the Cropsey myth evolved and how it became entwined with true crime. The documentary is both a chilling investigation into the disappearances and an exploration of how myths are shaped by real events. Zeman and Branciato delve into the folklore surrounding Cropsey, showing how the legend grew in the collective psyche of Staten Island residents. The film also emphasizes the lasting psychological effects of such an enduring myth, as well as the trauma caused by the real-life horrors that unfolded in the community. The eerie imagery of the film, which includes haunting shots of the abandoned Willowbrook State School, serves to remind viewers of the deep fear that the place which holds for those who remember it. The idea of these events may have been fueled by genuine fear and unresolved societal issues makes the Cropsey legend all the more powerful and disturbing. The Cropsey legend, the lasting impact. The Cropsey legend remains one of the most enduring and unsettling urban legend in American folklore. It serves as a perfect example of how myths and reality intertwine, often in horrifying ways. The real-life crimes committed by Andre Rand cast a shadow over the myth, and for those who remember the fear of the 1980s, the Cropsey legend is no longer just a story told around campfires. It is a haunting reminder of the community's struggle with fear, loss, and trauma. In the end, the story of Cropsey reveals how urban legends evolve. They begin as simple cautionary tales, but can morph into something more sinister when real-life events and tragedies entangle with myth. For the residents of Staten Island and the Legend of Cropsey, it is not just a tale. It is a reflection of their darkest fears, both real and imagined. That was a lot to take in. I knew it was going to be bad. Granted, I did not go into a lot of detail. Maybe once I get more comfortable doing true crime, maybe I will go into more of the details, but for just getting into it and dipping my toes in, it wasn't terrible. So you'll have to forgive me if you were expecting more details about, the things that happened. But I digress. I hope you enjoyed that. Learning about how sometimes things that we think are just, stories made up as a cautionary tale are so much more. And just the intertwining of both is terrifying. And my heart goes out to all those who were affected in that time. And that I hope that, even now, I hope that the society's fears and everything can be subsided because, it shouldn't be talked about even now as it is when it comes to mental illness. And it is so important to have these discussions about what's going on in the human mind. But with that being said, everyone, I hope you had an amazing, holiday season, and I hope your 2025 is going amazing. We're already halfway through, almost done with January, and I feel like it just was the first. But we are on all podcasting platforms. Please, if you're watching this on YouTube or any of them, please remember to give us a like, rate us, let us know what you think. Comment down below. I enjoy, interacting in the comments. I think it's really fun to see what people's opinions are on things. And with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Alright, bye guys.